Welcome to the Total Soccer Show and our latest edition of USMNT Weekly, the show where we bring you the latest news and analysis on the men's national team. On this episode, we're looking at the latest transfer news, including some potential moves in and out of Italy for USMNT first teamers. And if we get the time, we're going to answer a few of your questions too. My name's Ryan Bailey. Joining me today, your friend, my friend, the Taylor Rockwell. Hello, Taylor.
Hello, Ryan Bailey. Lovely to be here. Lovely to be here with you, too. I did enjoy that before we started recording. Ryan summarized it as, is this show transfers that maybe aren't happening? It's an interesting time for USMNT players abroad who are maybe moving, but maybe not. We're going to get to the bottom of it all.
Everything's up in the air at the moment, Taylor. We're going to delve into that airspace during the next 45 minutes or so. Maybe we'll devise a will it happenometer with a little needle.
I like
as
it.
to whether these things happen. Yeah, there we go. Demonstrating the needle if you're watching on YouTube. Graham Ruthven's here. Hello, Graham.
Hello, Ryan Bailey. How are you? Do you want me to continue doing that? Do you want me to make that a thing in this episode?
For the entire
doing the needle?
episode, if you will. Yeah.
Is it a needle or are you a windshield wiper? It could
Driving
really
it
go
around.
either
I'm
way.
like a very white person at a rap concert.
Oh, wow. Yeah, it's everything. You are everything, Graham.
Which is me.
Oh, boy.
frankly.
That was painful in how accurate it was.
We are an audio medium, but once again, listener, we have a YouTube channel. Please smash like and subscribe. Go visit us there. The link is in the show notes. You can see Graham do hand actions. There he goes again. All right. We also, by the way, have a Patreon, patreon.com/Total Soccer Show. It's the best way to support this here endeavor. Bonus episodes, bonus video, and access to our Discord, where all the cool kids are hanging out. There we go. USMNT Weekly, Taylor. Should we launch it? Should we get up into that airspace right now? What do you say?
Let's do it.
Right.
Where USMNT players might be if they're allowed to move, then they'll be up in the air. But for now, fully grounded, some of these guys.
If those pesky agents and those pesky sporting directors don't keep sparring, as seems to be happening, Taylor, at Juventus. We start off with Tim Weah, who seems to be unhappy, or his agent certainly is unhappy this week with Juventus for allegedly botching a transfer which seems to be heading in the direction of Marseille. In a statement to The Athletic, Tim Weah's agent said, Juve is a fantastic club. The sporting department is managed by 3 persons. 2 have class, and another is still searching for himself. Wonderful phrasing. We cannot blame him. 2 are looking for solutions and 1 is creating problems. It sounds like the 3 of us. Guess who's who? And we can't let that go. Tim Weah is always
Tips on Chiellini.
Oh, boy. Tim Weah is always professional, but he was left out of the Club World Cup. This person botched his Club World Cup, tried to force him to go where he wanted. Today is revenge, the quote continues. He's demanding a fortune and waiting for a Premier League offer that won't come and will never be approved by us, says Tim Weah's agent. Taylor,
This is the third person who's doing this. The third person in the front office who's searching for himself. What, is he on a gap year to Cambodia? Like, what's
something like
such
that.
weird phrasing.
That is the mother of all Ned Stark Game of Thrones butts. The old adage, never trust anything that comes before the butt, because that was, Juventus is a great club. Now here is my litany of offenses and angry moments. So he mentions one of the 3. You have Francois Modesto, who's their new technical director. I believe he had not yet come into power, come into operation during the Club World Cup, so it's probably not him. Giorgio Chiellini would be the second person as a possibility mentioned. And though Ryan does not love him, I think he has publicly said he is not involved in transfers or transfer dealings or any sort of negotiation, which leaves Damian Comoli. I'm sure I'm getting the Italian pronunciation wrong on that one, but he is the general manager of Juve, and that feels like who these comments are directed at. On the one hand, this feels like an agent doing his job and trying to kind of keep his client's interest front and center and making sure that a move stays possible. It does also feel like some mud is being slung in directions that maybe it doesn't need to be slung, because I think this is just Juve trying to do smart business because they haven't always done smart business, which is how they've gotten into the financial position they are in. So I understand the frustration. I understand the agitation to move. I also understand why Juve haven't done this move yet.
Yeah, I think this is dirty laundry airing, isn't it? I think you have to appreciate there's 2 sides to all of these kind of negotiations, and we're not appreciating that, or perhaps his agent isn't appreciating that Juve, Graham, probably have their own side of how these events have transpired.
Yeah, I think where some of the frustration from Weah's side of things, and this is from Paul Tenorio's reported piece for The Athletic on this story, which is, as you said, Ryan, that's where the quotes are made. Paul has some info that Weah's party believed Comoli had accepted an offer from Marseille of 14 million euros and then went back on that and now wants 20 million euros. So I can imagine, I can understand why that would be a frustrating situation if you think an offer's already been accepted and then they raise the price. But that seems to have been a pretty consistent thing for Juventus, where I think they've done something similar with Weston McKennie, where their price has gone up and down over the course of the window. So it all feels very political, and it feels like after these comments there might not be a way back at Juve for Tim Weah, which might be part of the plan to force this move through. But this feels like a real crossroads for him.
Yeah. Two things there. One, it was really interesting to see the timeline of reporting, because when it's first reported that he might move to Marseille or that he is surplus to requirement, the majority of the responses seem to be like he was a really good servant for the club. He worked really, really hard. He did a lot of kind of thankless work and played a number of different positions. Sad it didn't kind of come to more than this, but such is life. And after these comments, it has gone the other way. And now it's very much like, who does he think he is? He thinks he's bigger than the club. A lot of that is directed at his agent, but it does leave the situation feeling untenable. Graham, I wanted to ask you about that Marseille offer, because I was a little bit confused reading the reporting, and I wonder if it's one of those things where it depends on who is being briefed by whom. Because on the one hand, it sounds like, I think from one side, it's that they accepted the offer, but then asked for additional funds or additional guarantees or whatever. But then some of it seems to be that the original offer Juve accepted was from Nottingham Forest for Weah and Samuel Mbangula for a combined 22 million euros. When Weah doesn't agree to personal terms, and I think that's justifiable because I don't think that move would have been good for him. That move falls through. Mbangula now with Werder Bremen, that move made official for 10 million euros. So there's an idea that, well, if you were going to accept 2 for 22 and you've already sold Mbangula for 10, that means Weah at 14, you're actually making more than you were going to in the first place. And that seems to also be where some of the agent is pointing to with, like, you accepted this, but now you won't accept this. This feels punitive. I think I'm also correct in saying that the financial window, like that 22 million would have been on like the last quarter's books or the last financial window books, and so now it's a different set, and so you have to kind of consider that. But it does feel like there's a lot of moving parts to this. Ultimately, it feels a little bit like brinksmanship, and they're trying to get the best possible deal they can.
Yeah, I think your original reading there, Taylor, that there's probably all kinds of briefing going on there between players and agents and clubs is probably accurate. And to defend Juve a little bit, if that is the situation that you just outlined there, which is that sounds feasible and viable to me, that's kind of how the transfer window works. Like, if you pocket 10 million euros, all of a sudden your price for another player might change, because all of a sudden you've got that in your back pocket. You know, you might not need that 22 million. As you say, the books were getting closed at the end of June. There was a need for Juventus to move players on for that money. Now there isn't really that need, so they want a little bit more. So, yeah, I can understand frustration on both sides. I've always found it encouraging that Weah seems so certain on this particular move to Marseille, and the fact that he turned down that Nottingham Forest move, because you're absolutely right, Taylor. I don't think that was a good fit for him to go there. That's not worked out for many Americans going to the City Ground recently, and the fact that he seems to want Marseille or nothing says to me like he's been told he's going to play a clear role in that team. We talked about that a couple of weeks ago, where Luis Enrique's left to go to Inter Milan. There's a spot in the right wing-back position. He could even play in the left wing-back position. They're going to be in the Champions League this season. They've got Roberto De Zerbi as a head coach as well, which I think would be attractive for Weah. It's also just a cool club to join, Marseille. I think if you do well there, you're a bit of an icon. So I really do hope this one happens, because a lot of the time, certainly recently, it's felt like with a lot of the USMNT players on the move, we've sort of and ahed over whether it's a good fit for them. I think this one is a good fit for Tim Weah, and it's encouraging that he seems to recognise that as well.
It is confusing, though, because I agree. I think Marseille means he's probably a wing-back. Maybe he ends up being a winger. But by all accounts, if he stays with Juve, given some of the players they've cleared out, given the way they're likely to play this season, it also feels like Weah would be in contention to start at right wing-back. So I feel like either way, he's going to be in line to start at right wing back. And so my assumption was he didn't want to do that with Juventus. Maybe it's just not feeling valued, not feeling appreciated, not feeling like he will definitely have the starting job, and maybe not feeling like he's in the manager's plans is why that Marseille offer and the familiarity with Lyon is so tempting to him.
I wonder if there's familiarity also with following in his father's footsteps, because his dad, I think maybe when he was born, was a Marseille player. So maybe
I think you meant when George Weah was born. He was born into a Marseille kit. I was very confused. I got you.
Well, I think Tim Weah he was either at Man City or Marseille around the time he was born. So there might be some nostalgia in that for him as well. Taylor, I've seen him linked also with Leeds and Everton. Let's whip out the will it happenometer. It seems like, as Graham noted, Tim Weah's time in Italy might be concluding.
Yep.
Will it happen?
I think it does. I think if it doesn't, I think he ends up playing minutes for Juve and probably kind of falls into that Weston McKennie category of is going to be frozen out for a little bit. We'll maybe have to get a new agent, but then we'll end up playing a lot of minutes for Juve. But this does feel like a move that will happen. And I think at least some of that is because Juve need the money. I don't think that they are in dire financial straits, but they are not in the strongest situation. And I don't feel like this is a Juve team that are fully trying to compete right now. Obviously, they would like to compete. They would like to be top four. They would like to be in the Champions League. But it doesn't seem like they are fully backing the manager. It kind of feels like they are maybe trying to clear out some of the wages, clear out some of the excess contracts, and then next summer really identify who they want to be. But they are in a strange situation where they still have, say, Dusan Vlahovic, who between amortization and wages, I think he's going to be like a 42 million euro hit for them this year. They do not want him. By all accounts, they want him gone. They seem to want Douglas Luiz gone. They want to clear out those wages. They want to clear out those financial situations, but no one is really biting. The Vlahovic one feels for all the world like a move that Manchester United would have overpaid for a couple years ago. So I guess that's progress from a Manchester United perspective.
They'll do it in January now.
Yeah, exactly, for 90 million or whatever. But so I think as a result, Juve are in a position where they need to sell some players. They want to clear out the books a little bit because they want to be able to reinvest. They've already brought in Jonathan David. And so I think they have to look to players who can basically generate a profit for them. And I think Tim Weah is one of those. I think maybe Weston McKennie is identified as one of those, and that's where some of those rumors have come from. So I also think there is posturing here from Juve as they try to get the best possible price. By all accounts, I think supporters feel like they are often made to accept lower offers, made to pay over the top for players because they have the reputation they do and the standing they do, and at the same time they don't tend to move on players for a good profit. And so I think some people are sort of excited that they're playing hardball and trying to get just a little bit more from Marseille, who themselves are claiming that they don't have the money to make moves happen. So it's a lot of pointing at poverty while demanding more money, while also still signing players for Juve. So an interesting time for sure. I think it ends up happening, though.
Yeah, I would agree. Juve want the next month to be a huge rebuild, and they're being linked with Jadon Sancho, and Damon Comolli's come in as the new the head of the front office. Giannioli left at the end of last season. Yeah, Comolli, never been fully impressed with him. I think he did some decent work at Spurs, but his time at Liverpool wasn't great. So I don't know if that bodes well for Juve. But put it this way, if Tim Weah is still at Juventus next season, something will have gone wrong for Juventus because their rebuild is counting on them being able to clear out players like him, and I think ultimately they will accept some form of offer from Marseille.
Where are you on Igor Tudor? Do you feel like he is the guy? Because he feels to me like the guy for now until they can find somebody who's definitely going to be the guy.
The classic Serie A, like sort of top half of Serie A manager who just bounces around various teams.
Is it Allegri? Allegri coming back? Is that what you're saying?
Allegri's already back at another team that he previously coached a few years ago coming into this season. Not totally convinced by Igor Tudor. I think a lot of Juventus fans were, and observers, neutral observers, were trying to convince themselves that like something fundamentally changed when he replaced Motta last season and the final third of last season. I watched Juventus a bunch last season. I didn't really see much of a change, and I didn't see much of a change at the Club World Cup either. I think Kenan Yildiz has maybe been like emboldened as more of the sort of number 10 rather than as a winger. So maybe there'll be some individual players who benefit, but as a unit, I think Juventus are so far away from where they want to be.
When does Luciano Spalletti take over? What month?
Yeah, that's a good bet actually. November.
Sacked by Italy, so he's available.
Yep.
But between the Napoli success, having managed Inter, having managed Roma, failing with Italy, that would be maybe a controversial appointment. But Juve have had a few of those too, so I could see that happening.
Pet duck? Is it still? Do we have any reports on the pet duck? Is it still intact? I hope so.
Please tell me it is. I don't know if I could handle
intact
anything else.
That was the best way I could think of phrasing it, Taylor. Weston McKennie, we mentioned him as well. I've seen some links with Roma, a potential swap deal with Lorenzo Pellegrini there. It is, Taylor, another summer of Willy Won't-He for Weston McKennie.
After it felt for all the world like we were done with this. It really did feel like, nope, okay, we're not taking away his parking spot this time. We're not taking away his ranch or his locker.
Yeah. What happened to the new contract?
Right?
In May or whatever it was, like 2 months ago.
Yeah, and that's where, like, again, as I said, it feels to me like they are basically looking at any player where they feel like there could be a profit made. They're willing to entertain offers, I think, within reason. Kenan Yildiz feels like one that they will not move despite Chelsea theoretically offering them a good bit of money. Weston McKennie, for as good of a role player as he has been, as faithful of a servant, and kind of as willing as he is to get in line even after they publicly try to move him on, it feels like he is one who, like, fans like, but they're not going to be furious if he's sold. He does a lot of jobs, but I don't think it is sort of seen as like an elite difference maker for them. And so he feels like one where they could make a little bit of profit off of his sale. So why not see if there's any interest? It does feel very speculative to me, and it feels a little bit like, hey, it's happened before, so why not report on it again and get some clicks? This one I don't think ends up happening unless there is a club that comes in with a pretty sizable transfer offer, and I'm not sure there is one of those at play.
Yeah, this story, it seems like it's yet to firm up in the same way that the Weah transfer story has. But I tried my best to follow some of the breadcrumbs last night, because it's not just Roma that are being linked with him. Basically, Weston McKennie is basically the Igor Tudor of the Serie A transfer window right now, because he's been linked with every club in Serie A. So Roma, apparently there were reports over the weekend that Roma are interested, and Juve like Brian Cristante, and they want some sort of swap deal because Roma can't pay the €20 million fee that Juve want for McKennie. But Roma don't want to get rid of Brian Cristante. They have offered Lorenzo Pellegrini. Juve have said no to that. AC Milan and Napoli were also having a look, but according to Tuttosport, it's a similar scenario where neither want to stump up the cash, so maybe it's a loan with an option to buy or some sort of loan deal. And then in that same report, I saw MLS mentioned as an option. Now, I don't know if that's just them referencing the Cincinnati flirting that happened last year, or whether they're aware of like renewed interest from them or another team in MLS. They didn't go into details. But in terms of staying in Serie A, none of those moves really fill me with a lot of enthusiasm. I mean, Roma could be interesting. Gasperini has obviously taken charge as the new manager there. I think they're anticipating that he's going to like overhaul the culture and the playing style and everything like that. So that could theoretically be a good stylistic fit. But Roma have got Manu Kone in central midfield, and if they're not willing to get rid of Brian Cristante would probably be ahead of him in the pecking order as well. So I'd be worried that McKennie would then be pushed out to the wing backs again, which is not really his position. So there's drawbacks with that move. And then AC Milan are just an absolute chaos club at the moment. I don't feel great about dropping him in there, even if theoretically there's maybe some midfield minutes up for grabs after Reinders left. But AC Milan have already been active in midfield. They brought in Luka Modric and Samuel Ricci as well this summer. And then Napoli, I don't see him starting in that midfield unit either, especially with De Bruyne, coming into that club over the summer. So, yeah, none of these options feel great for Weston.
Yeah, two things. One, I think the Milan link is heavily related to Allegri taking over, right? And so there's a feeling that like Allegri may have identified McKennie as a really useful player, so why not bring him into Milan where he can do a number of different things and put out some fires. So that feels like he could be a useful player, but again, it feels like he's not being brought in to do one thing, but a few different things based on areas of need. It also feels like there's a little bit of, I guess, rumor generation similar to the MLS one with Cincinnati, where it's like, oh, well, Allegri's there, and Allegri liked him, so Milan might be interested. I'm not sure how much truth there is to that one, and Graham's already outlined why some of those moves might not make sense. The McKennie move, way out to some extent. Matt Turner, we're going to talk about him later. My question for you both, and it is like very much late night. I think it was like 12:30 when I came up with this idea. Like, we know that there is going to be much greater interest in soccer with the U.S. hosting a World Cup. We know that companies are going to start advertising more. We know there's going to be more general interest in trying to pull in a greater audience and kind of make money off of how much money there's expected to be related to this World Cup. Do you all feel like some of the moves that are theoretically happening for Americans relates to that? Because like the Matt Turner one, jumping ahead a little bit, felt for all the world to me like John Textor identifying, if we have an American in goal and he's the American goalkeeper, we're probably going to sell some jerseys. We're probably going to get a few more clicks, a little bit more interest. And I do wonder if there is some positioning to try to get an American in so you can sell more jerseys and get more interest in your team.
I think there is definitely something to that, Taylor. I think it's something to it when a club like Roma or an American-owned club seeing the value in having more American players on staff. That's just synergy, to use a gross business word. But yeah,
there'll be more of that later. Don't worry. There'll be lots of gross business words when we talk about Lyon and John Texter.
Taylor, I thought you were going to pitch us the Team USA pre-94 World Cup team, 31st team in MLS.
Oh, that'd be fun. That would be fun and also a disaster. It would be fascinating to see Poch manage the U.S. as a club team in MLS. I think they probably win. I think they do.
Well, there we go. Weston McKennie, sounds like MLS path is there for you. Just going to say we have ranch on tap here in Charlotte. You'd be very welcome. So let's take a quick break. When we come back, we'll talk about Gio Reyna. We'll talk about a lot of the other deals that are up in the airspace for USMNT players. Join us then. Total Soccer Show, welcome back to USMNT Weekly. We're getting back into the airspace, Taylor. All aboard the Gio Reyna Express flight? No. Dortmund and Parma reportedly
definitely not
over
an express flight. This one.
Yeah, reportedly a clash over transfer fee there, Taylor. What's the impasse here? What's going on?
Yeah.
Is Gio going to be Italy bound this summer?
I do think he will be. This feels like a game of transfer chicken as to who will swerve at the very last moment to kind of concede the point, which it then occurred to me is basically just what negotiation is. So they're in negotiation is the longer way to put it. But I think Dortmund were holding out for 10 million euros or thereabouts. Parma initially offered 6 million with add-ons. They've now increased that to 8 million with additional performance-based bonuses. I think that was like in the last day or so. And that seems to have moved the needle considerably. So what this feels like to me is basically both teams sort of comfortable in their positioning right now and sort of slowly negotiating. I think Dortmund are like not in a position where they are frantic to sell Gio Reyna, but I also think they don't have really any other suitors at present, so they're not really in a rush in case maybe one does develop. For Parma, by contrast, they've sold their top goal scorer last year. They've got some money to play with, but I think they don't want to be hasty and they don't want to kind of overspend for a player that has been identified by Carlos Cuesta, their new manager, as being a player that he wants. They've reportedly already agreed personal terms. So it feels like a move that is going to happen. It's just how, like, it's going to come down to who concedes 500,000 euros or whatever it might be to make the deal get across the line.
Ooh, fun.
If I'm Parma in this negotiation room, I'm just waiting out. I'm going as far into the window as I can, because it seems like there's no real other interest in Gio Reyna, maybe from LAFC, but if there's another European option on the table in a top league like Serie A, it feels like Reyna's going to go for that, and Reyna's done at Dortmund. He's not going to play this season. He's got a year left on his contract, so Parma surely know that Dortmund will do a deal. Like this is free money basically for Dortmund for a player that's not got any part of their future. And so I kind of wonder if this has still got, as frustrating as it would be for Reyna, I'm sure Parma, the manager as well, wants to get the player in quickly for the start of the season. But I kind of wonder if this one might be pushed all the way to the end of the window so that Parma get a real discount deal.
From what I have read, it sounds like Dortmund are like unilaterally taking a very hardline stance with all transfer negotiations this summer. They are sticking with the price they have set. They don't want to start conceding kind of any ground, I think, for a fear that then that opens up that, oh, you quoted 10 million for Gio Reyna and then you accepted 7 or 8 million, so you'll take 20% less than whatever you're asking for a lot of your players. And I think there is a desire to make sure that they aren't just getting fleeced and that clubs are paying the fees that they have set out. And so I think that hardline stance plays into the situation with Gio Reyna. Ultimately, I think a deal gets done because it makes sense for the player, it makes sense for Dortmund, it makes sense for Parma, it makes sense for everybody involved. It's just a matter of kind of who blinks first, who ends up saying, okay, fine, we'll pay what you want, or okay, fine, we'll accept your offer.
Graham, in your opinion, let's say you are Gio Reyna's representation, you're his agent, or God forbid his parents. What would you say is in his best interest for next season? Where would you send him? If it's not Parma, is there anywhere else you think would actually suit him best at this point?
Wherever he is going to play soccer. Like we spoke about this a couple of weeks ago, and that is the bar for Gio Reyna at this point. He has not been a soccer player for 3 seasons at this point. There was a chance that with Niko Kovac coming in at Dortmund that maybe there's a manager with a different opinion of him. He was actually, under Terzic, was getting minutes off the bench towards the end of his time, and Kovac has come in, and if anything, he's got an even lower opinion of Gio Reyna. So he just needs to go somewhere where he's playing. That is the first thing he needs to look for. Ideally, he would be playing in a team. Obviously, when he went to Nottingham Forest, they were a team that played on rapid counter-attack under Nuno. And Gio's good in quick transition, but it felt a little bit too far to that extreme for his style of play. So ideally you want a team that's going to play, is going to give him lots of reps on the ball. And I think, Taylor, was it you that asked me a number of months ago, so you probably don't remember, but you asked me about Rangers for Gio Reyna.
Yeah.
And at that point, I think I dismissed that because Rangers were in a bit of a state. And Rangers are still kind of in a little bit of a state. But what's changed over the summer is Russell Martin's been hired as their new manager, and for people who remember Southampton in the Premier League last season, I feel sorry for you, first of all. But second of all, for their style of play under Russell Martin, at least, they were a team that loved to have the ball and make use of number 10s and drifting attacking midfielders. And so I've actually completely flipped for Gio Reyna. That was the one drawback. I've completely flipped on Rangers now and think that would be a great place for Gio Reyna to go now and be the main man, because he would be a key figure. He'd be one of the main men for a dominant team in a league like the Scottish Premiership, while also getting some exposure to most likely the Europa League. I don't think Rangers will qualify for the Champions League this season, but I haven't heard any chat. And also there's the family link there as well, which doesn't really matter, but it's nice for the fans.
So I think for me at least, I always have the Premier League in mind when I think of financials and transfers and the like, and that is very unfair because there is more money there than there is anywhere else in the world, except for maybe Saudi Arabia. So, Graham, with that in mind, let's say Rangers wanted to try to gazump Parma. Is 9 million euros a considerable outlay for them? Because it feels it would be for a player that is a bit of a gamble.
They wouldn't pay 9 million for.
See, there you go.
It'd have to be some kind of loan with an obligation to buy or something. 9 million would be Rangers' biggest signing since Tore André Flo. Do you remember him? In 2002, over 20 years ago. So not feasible.
Yeah, and I think that is the thing to remember with this deal is though you have 70, 80, 90 million pound moves in the Premier League, when it comes to Parma, who have sold players this summer and are in an okay financial position, that's not a small amount to spend. And so I think it's not unreasonable for them to try to hold out for the best possible deal. At the same time, I think that they are briefing in a really intelligent way that a lot of the talking points have been Carlos Cuesta is really excited about Gio Reyna. He sees a role for him. He sees how he could best utilize him. And so I think if that deal gets across the line, and I think it does, you end up with Gio Reyna moving to a club where he's coming in feeling valued and prioritized and he will be given opportunities. And I think you maybe get a more motivated player who gets that fresh start he so desperately needs in a club that want him and want to try to use him, as opposed to a club that are sort of bringing him in and rolling the dice and seeing, but if it doesn't work out, he'll be back on the bench. With Parma, it feels like much more they have a vested interest in him starting and playing well. So that's why I am optimistic for that move to happen and hopeful that it does.
Off on a slight tangent, Taylor, when you talk about the money that the Premier League has, they've spent £1.6 billion on transfers this summer, which is more than all the other top 5 leagues in Europe combined. Sunderland have spent nearly as much as Real Madrid in the transfer window this summer.
That is unexpected. Hey, but anytime you can make Granit Xhaka your captain without him ever playing a minute for you, you got to do it.
Yeah, you got to do it.
Wonderful stuff. All right, couple more deals to discuss. Josh Sargent. Why don't we talk about Josh Sargent? Last time we checked in, Graham, I think he was off to Wolfsburg, but maybe that one's fallen through. Where are we at with Mr. Norwich?
Yeah, this deal looked to be as good as done, as you say. So Wolfsburg had agreed a deal with Norwich. The fee was 19 million euros with, I think, a couple million in add-ons somewhere in that deal. Then it all fell through and The Athletic reported that it was Sargent who ultimately decided not to go through with the transfer. Taylor?
I have thoughts on that. No, go. It's just this is another one that I think is fascinating because it is very clearly who is getting briefed by whom is informing the reporting. But more on that in a second. Go ahead, Graham.
Okay, yeah, I'll do the full recap first, or the full situation scope. So yeah, there's not a whole lot of information about why he did a U-turn, but there's been some suggestions that he wants to stay in England. Specifically, he wants to have another crack at the Premier League. Of course, that didn't go so well for him last time. Leeds and Burnley have both been linked. Obviously, there's the Daniel Farke link from when they worked together at Norwich. The problem there is that Farke liked to use Sargent on the wing, and that might be where he fits in at Leeds. Brentford, apparently, as well, have a long-standing interest in Sargent. There could be an opportunity for him there because Mbeumo is gone, Wissa could be leaving as well, new manager, bit of a rebuild. Maybe there is some minutes for Sargent to grab there, some first-team minutes. Burnley, as I mentioned, they're the other team that has been linked. All three of these teams, I think it's likely, will be fighting relegation this season, so that's not ideal for Josh Sargent, but realistically that is probably the rung on the ladder that Sargent is going to have to pull himself up using. And Burnley need to add more goals. They got promoted last season from the Championship on the basis of their defensive record. Remember there was that incredible run that they were on, like it was something like 15 games in a row that they hadn't conceded. That was basically how they got up to the Premier League. Only 2 players in their entire squad made it into double figures in goals. Zion Fleming had a decent season last season, but not absolutely outstanding. So Sargent could potentially dislodge him as the number 9, and Burnley they're going to have to play in quick transition more this season, which I have always thought is a decent fit for Sargent. So of those 3, Burnley feels like maybe the most feasible, the most viable fit, but everything is up in the air for Sargent after that Wolfsburg deal fell through.
So here's where I am confused by that deal. So I read that reporting that he like nixed the move. He didn't want it to happen. I also read that Norwich, after those negotiations began, then I think the quote was wanted a sum considerably north of 20 million euros. So they were holding out for more money theoretically. But there was also reporting in Germany that Sargent was in Wolfsburg and was at their training facility and had sort of met with officials and been convinced by the project. So, and I think it was while he was there, according to those reports, that the deal fell through. So I don't know if they're just making up that he was in Germany. That feels like a big thing to exaggerate.
What was it about the training ground that he didn't like?
Exactly.
They don't have the fancy kind of soap here.
But that's where I wonder if like that deal was going to happen, and at the last minute Norwich were like, actually 28 million. He's already there, take it or leave it. And they're like, no, we're not taking that. And so then you have to have kind of scramble reporting of, well, he wasn't convinced and they wanted more money and Wolfsburg couldn't kind of make the deal get across the line. Either way, what it feels like to me is Norwich are not in a position where they really need to sell. They have been a very smart club with the way they have kind of handled their finances. Even if that puts them mid-table in the Championship, they sell a good number of players most seasons. They tend to make a profit, or I think with the way you can amortize and the like, you end up making a sizable profit with a lot of their sales. And so I think they look at Josh Sargent, who was 4th in the Championship in scoring, as a player that they don't really want to get rid of. They did bring in 23-year-old Danish center forward Mathias Kvistgaarden from Brøndby for 8 million euros. That feels like a Josh Sargent replacement if he is indeed off. But if he's not, then you've got another striker option in there. You've got more depth. And I think they're sort of waiting to see if there is going to be Premier League money at the end of this. Because, 4th top scorer for a mid-table Championship club to then be like, no, he's worth 25 million euros is a big amount to ask. Like Joe Bellingham goes for 30 million from Sunderland, who, lest we forget, were promoted. Like that's I think the biggest move out of the Championship so far this summer. So to be holding out for that tells me they're basically content to keep him unless a Premier League club wants to spend some money to bring him in.
I wonder if players start to consider that landscape where previously it was like, well, I'll go to Norwich, I'll use that club as a stepping stone to a bigger club, maybe somewhere else in Europe. And these clubs are so rich, as we were just talking about, with Sunderland outspending or spending nearly as much as Real Madrid in the summer transfer window, that these clubs, for, I don't mean to be harsh on Josh Sargent, but like, not a superstar, like a mediocre to average player at that kind of level, or certainly at Premier League level, they're asking for these astronomical fees from European clubs that they just cannot meet. And so it's harder for these players now to use these, unless you absolutely smash it out of the park like a Joe Bellingham or something like that. it's harder for these players to get out of these clubs and to use them in the way that they used to as stepping stones. So, yeah, I do wonder if that starts to become part of the thought process.
We shall see. I mean, last time Wolfsburg got a foreign player with that hair colour, he went on to be one of the Premier League's greatest players of all time. So, there's a good pathway there for Josh Sargent. We shall see. Taylor, Matt Turner. And Lyon, the saga continues.
Poor Matt Turner.
If Matt Turner does go there, do we think he's going to be Donald Glover holding the pizza, walking into the apartment, and everything's on fire?
Yes.
Okay. It seems that way, doesn't it?
Yeah.
It seems like things are a bit of a mess down there in Lyon.
That's an understatement. That's an understatement. So let me try to kind of like set the table for people who haven't been following Lyon. I have not. And as a casual observer to the situation there, I did kind of assume that things were actively on fire because the narrative, the kind of reporting around them this summer has been, oh, they're relegated because of their financial situation. Oh, they're not relegated for now. And to kind of, again, go back to it, basically they were provisionally relegated in November because of their financial losses, and they basically had until June to correct that financial position. So I think that was the club was found to be 175 million euros in debt. Along the way, they sell Ryan Cherki, they sell Kakare, they sell Saïd Benrahma, they released Alexander Lacazette, they released Anthony Lopez, their goalkeeper, or one of their goalkeepers. So they're clearing a lot of wages, they're making a lot of money in their transfers. John Textor, the former owner-operator, I'm unclear where he is at this point. He sold his stake, or sold some of his stake in Crystal Palace from 77% to 42.9%. That's 250 million euros that then were used to boost Lyon's financial position. So they basically presented their improved financial standing to the DNCG, which is the French football financial watchdog. And they said, nope, not good enough. Relegation upheld.
They said, who's this American goalkeeper here?
What now? And so what I will say for Lyon is that I think this is the system working in effect, because it sounds like basically that watchdog said, nope, that is not enough. We need a better, more realistic depiction of things. And so then Lyon go back, they rework their financials, they kind of come up with a new financial plan and structure. They appeal that relegation. They propose the new set of books and financials, and that is approved, which is why their relegation is overturned. But a lot of that has to do with selling players. A lot of that has to do with, I think, kind of capping salaries, capping expenses. John Textor also announces he is taking a back seat, stepping way back from day-to-day operations, which sounds like maybe it was part of the plan as well. And so you have new board members coming in who are trying to kind of make sure that the financial situation is such that they can continue to operate and not be relegated. And it does seem like a huge part of that is getting rid of a lot of the deals that Textor had agreed to prior to that relegation being announced, when he thought things were going to be okay. And Matt Turner is one of those. It's a pretty sizable expenditure for a club in their position. And so the reporting out of France is that that the new board members are hiring lawyers to try to nullify that deal for Turner. So he is essentially either going back to a club who don't want him, or sold to a club who don't want him, but probably do need him. But I think given their financial situation, don't really want to have to kind of spend that money to get him in.
Yeah, I don't think there's any question that Lyon need a goalkeeper. They just sold. I can't remember if he was listed in the Luca Perry. So he's just gone to Leeds. He was their starting goalkeeper. So there is a place there for Matt Turner.
Yeah, they don't have a starter. They have basically two goalkeepers who've never played senior minutes, and Remy Deschamps, who is very much a backup.
But by the sounds of it, if this goes through, Turner's going to get a lot of shot practice playing for Lyon next season, which might not be a bad thing for a goalkeeper. But this has become a nightmare for him, because the fact that they're bringing in lawyers. I also read a L'Equipe article. Now, it was translated on Google, and it might just have been a turn of phrase, but their article said that Turner had signed a contract, which would make sense why they're then bringing in lawyers to try and unpick that contract. All the while, he desperately needs game time this season. He's waiting for a resolution on this. He can't do anything else until he knows what's happened here. And goalkeeper is maybe the worst position where this could happen. For any player on the pitch, any position, this is the worst position for it to happen to. Because what well-run team is waiting to the end of the window to get their starting goalkeeper in? And so then even if he gets out of this contract, it's going to be slim pickings for him towards the end of the window. So this really couldn't have gone any worse for Matt Turner. It's a complete nightmare.
It is, because if he goes there, like, he is the presumptive starter, you assume for the amount they're bringing him in for, if they do end up agreeing to that he is the starter. He's going to get a lot of minutes. That is very good for him, but it's still a situation where, quite publicly, they are trying not to have to do that deal. That doesn't feel like it's, to be clear, about Matt Turner necessarily. It doesn't feel like it's this guy isn't good enough, this guy is a terrible investment. It's more so, our financials don't allow us to spend the money that we have guaranteed already, so we need to find a way to kind of creatively navigate some of this. If I am an MLS team that wants to make a splash and needs a goalkeeper, I would be putting in a phone call, because this doesn't seem like it's going to get resolved anytime soon. I think he ends up, if he's already signed the contract and if things are already agreed, I don't know how you get out of that if you're Lyon, other than saying basically, we are going to drag this out. We're not going to pay you your money, Nottingham Forest. So do with it what you will, but we're going to go to court. We're going to make this terrible, and maybe Forest themselves try to pull out of the deal, and then everybody agrees, and then it's back to kind of square one for Matt Turner.
Yeah. On that MLS point, Taylor, Tommy Scoops reported last night that the Revs are exploring the possibility of re-signing, of course, Matt Turner. But that feels like a situation where if that's a messy contractual legal mess, they easily and quickly walk away from that whole situation, which is why this is a nightmare for Matt Turner, because he might be locked into a club that he can't play for while being prevented from signing for another club at a time when he desperately needs to be playing ahead
the Sancho
of the World Cup.
dream, we call it.
Poor Matt Turner. Again, my prediction from MLS season previews was that he'll play for San Diego. Still think that should happen, because otherwise it's staying in a club in England who don't want him and aren't going to play him, going to a club in France where they don't seem to want him, or going to the Revs who are a dumpster fire. So I don't know which one of those is the best option, but I have some sympathy for him, because this is not a situation of his creation, aside from that initial move to Nottingham Forest.
Yeah, there was a Sports Illustrated article on the options available to Matt Turner, and one of them was go on loan, but the article then further down said, we're not entirely sure which club he would go on loan from, whether it would be Lyon or Nottingham Forest. So nobody knows who owns Matt Turner at this point.
Yeah, I think I read that same article, and there was also an element of other players have left difficult situations for MLS, so there is precedent. I was like, oh, we are just grasping away at those straws, fellas.
So we've gone through a number of transfers, Taylor, in this episode so far. Is the conclusion that everything's going great and US players are at a premium right now?
It's a mixed bag, truly. And I think it's an interesting one. It's why I really enjoyed doing this episode, because on the surface, it does seem like, oh, man, nobody wants Americans. No Americans are moving. They're all going to be in a terrible situation. But in reality, it seems like Tim Weah has a definite suitor. Juve want more money. Weston McKennie has a number of suitors, and I think probably ends up staying at Juve. That's not the worst situation. Matt Turner had a suitor, and then their financial situation imploded. Josh Sargent is apparently very, very valuable, and is either going to stay and score goals for Norwich or be moved to a Premier League club for a good chunk of change. Reyna, it feels like, has a suitor and will end up moving, is my best guess. So in the end, I think a lot of this is just positioning and the slowness of the window so far. To Graham's point, I think as we get closer and closer to the closing of the window, that's when I think a lot of these moves get expedited and finally get done.
There we go. All right. Now, if only there was some discussion about which of the current USMNT players would make a very suitable coach, a head coach for the program in the next few years. Oh, a listener question has just dropped in about that. Let's answer that after this
convenient.
break. Total Soccer Show, welcome back to USMNT Weekly. We hope you enjoyed those advertisements. And a reminder, if you would like to get a Weston McKennie, use code TSS to get 30% off of your next Weston McKennie if you're listening. Any clubs, please and thank you.
Don't tempt me.
You in for him, Graham?
It seems like a good time.
Graham FC?
I think we'd get on.
Yeah. How do you
I'm
like?
not a big fan of ranch.
Do you like espresso?
To be fair,
he doesn't.
I'm not a massive espresso fan. No, flat white sort of guy.
Good. You get along just fine. All right. This is the question time. Nick Price has been in touch, and Nick Price asks, whomst among the current crop of USMNT players is most likely to be head coach at the 2050-ish World Cup? We're talking 20 or so years' time. Who will be the first to be a top-flight head coach in general, in any league? Taylor, let's start the bidding with your good self. It seems like the mould is like a defensive midfielder, maybe a defender.
Yeah, why is it so many defensive midfielders or midfield anchors become top managers? I mean, I'm kind of I'm spoiling what my answer is here, but I was thinking about this when researching this question. Pep, Arteta, Xavi Alonso all played the same position.
Interesting. So do you have Tyler Adams then as your answer?
Yeah, I do. I completely spoiled that.
I think he makes a lot of sense. Like, has he... I guess I've never heard him talk about management. And I've never heard him talk about like wanting to continue his education and wanting to continue to be part of the game. Not that I've heard really any of these nominees talk about that, but I don't know, for some reason he doesn't strike me as a manager, and I'm unclear why. So I look forward to being convinced by Graham.
I think when you hear him talk, he does sound like a manager. Admittedly, I've never heard him, to your point, Taylor, I've never heard him talk about wanting to become a manager or becoming a coach, but he's still young, right? Was he like 20, 26 or something? So he probably isn't thinking about that right now. Maybe that'll come in the next few years. But I don't know. I think Tyler Adams has like that natural authority, but also has a sort of intensity that the best managers have. Like the best managers are a little bit weird. Like have that intensity. I don't know if they'd be the best for like having a pint with. Tyler Adams actually would be pretty good to have a pint with. He seems like a cool dude.
Yeah,
but I think he's got that. When I hear him speak, he seems to have that like natural authority.
I agree with that entirely. I agree with like the tenacity and the leadership and some of that fight that you see, that some of that like leadership spirit that you see when he's playing for the U.S. and at club level. I think maybe also some of it is that like there are obvious limitations to his game, and a lot of those is informed by the clubs he has played for prior to his present club. And so I think maybe that's the other thing that is like my one knock against him. I feel very, very weird saying negative things about Tyler Adams. Just that, like, I don't know how many different tactical styles he has played under. So like maybe I basically see
Big
him
Sam,
as yes, perfect,
Nagelsmann.
Yes.
What a spectrum!
I see him kind of as like a little bit Jesse Marsch-esque, where I think it's about like if he does become a coach, I think it's a lot of intensity and leadership and fight, but with a lot of like pressing behind it. And I think sometimes to do that, you have to have a pedigree of a certain standing, and I'm not sure he is there yet. This feels, again, very, very odd to be criticizing future Tyler Adams for his perceived shortcomings.
Would your opinion on his pedigree change, Taylor, if he went bald? I feel like that would
That's it. That's what you need. Speaking of that, Michael Bradley has been my answer since he was a player and remains my answer, but he is not a current player. So I feel like the obvious one is Tim Ream for me. I think if he gets his like coaching badges while he's maybe finishing up with Charlotte, and then takes a gig in England as like an assistant and sort of like dips the toe in because he has such a long career in England. He has connections there. I think he still has enough goodwill that he could kind of like go there and not be seen as like, who's this American who's coming in? Like that would be the knock against Michael Bradley, I think, is he has a European pedigree. He played in a number of different countries, but it's been a while since then, and none of them were, he was truly like the central figure, the man for that team that you think of as being like then desirable for him to go coach there and be the head coach there. Whereas Tim Ream, I think maybe there would be more of that. And then I think also he's just shown that he is adaptable. He is a good leader. He seems to kind of like fall into the good graces of whatever manager he is playing for. And I think also has shown that he is a good reader of the game and does a good job of sort of having a high standard for his teammates, but also understanding what's being asked of him and helping kind of organize the team accordingly. So I think there's a lot of coaching ability, prowess already there.
Has there ever been a manager with a man bun, though? That's my question.
There has to have been, and it was
TalkSport
probably a great look.
Will lose its mind. Woke nonsense.
My other...
Feels very Forest Green Rovers to me, Graham.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, true.
I have one more outside nominee for you all, and it's a person we've already mentioned on this show. It's Tim Weah. And I don't know where he would end up. I don't know when he would kind of wade into that one. And maybe he has he's got fashion aspirations. I think he's got musical aspirations. So
presidential aspirations, maybe.
Exactly. So maybe management doesn't appeal to him, but he has name recognition. I think his reputation is hardworking, hard studying, adaptable, and a little bit feisty. And I think a lot of that, you kind of pour that into a managerial mold that I think that gives you a good sort of blueprint and foundation. A lot of this goes back to when he first breaks through with the U.S. I've talked about this many, many times, but just Greg Berhalter talking about how Tim Weah is a player who requests film, requests your sort of notes on his game, be it with the national team or the club, and wants to improve, wants to watch film, wants to understand what he's getting wrong, why his positioning wasn't good enough, how he needs to close down, when he needs to drop off versus when he needs to show. Like, I think a person who is consuming that information and wants to watch more film and wants to understand more of the game, to me, is the type of person who then becomes a manager. And I think also, like, I've enjoyed his media appearances. I think he's good at saying things without saying things, even if the Italian food conversation ended up with him being like, so you're saying Italian food is trash? I kind of agree. Like, I'm not sure that's necessarily where you want to go, and maybe that doesn't endear him to Italian clubs. But Weah is my outside nominee because otherwise I'm not sure there's a ton of people going into management in the current U.S. team. Christian Pulisic has Landon Donovan media written all over him.
Yeah, I found it quite difficult to pick out the players that are... but I find that generally difficult, just because it's not until later in their careers that players start to take on like the natural authority of a manager. But I thought maybe Sebastian Berhalter, 2050, will we be ready as a fandom and as a society for another Berhalter as USMNT manager?
With his dad as an assistant? With Gio Reyna as an assistant. Let's make it even more chaotic.
Dream team.
Yep. I did have one more that I was trying to figure out, because I was looking at this team and just trying to like gauge who will go into media, who will never ever be in the public eye again. And the obvious answer to this in terms of who is definitely going to be a head coach in any league, Christian Roldan is going to manage the Seattle Sounders, right? That has to happen. Like, I feel like that's going to happen in 5 years. And then if that goes well, maybe that's Christian Roldan takes over the U.S. at some point if he's an MLS manager who's getting good results and bringing through young players. I think once it goes Pochettino, Pep, Mourinho, then maybe there's a desire to go back to the American well with an American talent, and then Christian Roldan comes in.
There we go.
I think that's the right answer. And the position as well. Again, there's a trend.
I'm just preoccupied by where the World Cup's going to be held in 2050-ish.
Mars.
It's going to be Mars, isn't it? Yeah.
I think it'll be a gigafactory, maybe.
Yeah.
Antarctica, now that it's a balmy 75 degrees there year round.
Oh, great stuff. All right, thank you very much, Nick Price, for that question. Clay W. has also been in touch with the question. He's asking which USMNT eligible player with 0 appearances is most likely to get an appearance at the World Cup. We've run out of time on this feed to answer that question. Why don't you head over to our bonus feed on Patreon, where we will be answering that question, patreon.com/Total Soccer Show. And once again, thank you to everybody who does support us via that medium. But Taylor, that's it for this episode on this here feed. Thank you very much for all your expertise and analysis as always.
Thank you all very much, Tyler Adams. I apologize again, and I look forward to you managing in the top flight, multiple top flight gigs all at once. I look forward to it.
Oh, wow. Multitasking. I like it. Graham Ruthven, thank you very much indeed, sir.
Thank you, Ryan Bailey.
And listener, thank you the mostest for joining us here. We'll be back on the feed very shortly, but for now, bye.